Right, okay. Today we are going to be making a very simple soap that you can make at home. I generally make a number of soaps as Christmas presents to my friends and family every year. So I thought I'd take you along with me when I do this latest batch. This is designed to be a simple, straightforward soap that is made with very low cost, easily accessible, both ingredients and items that you'll need in order to make the soap. Laid out before you is everything you'll need. You will need a large stainless steel or non-reactive pot. So absolutely not aluminium, definitely not copper. A stainless steel works best, really, so you'll need that. You'll be using that to stir in rather than to heat in. So you can probably do an earthenware or a stone vessel as well. Plastic container of a large enough size would be also fine. Because in this one we are not using 100% oils, we're using some fats as well as oils. We'll need a double boiler of some description in order to melt the fats that we're using. You'll need a stick blender. That isn't mandatory. You can do it with a whisk. You'll break your arm, however. So much quicker and easier to use a stick blender. Rubber spatula, again non-reactive. Some scales that are fairly accurate. You'll need some, and these are optional colours. Actually, I've got some glitter there. However, and I will point this out right from the get-go, traditional glitter is a microplastic. Microplastics in soap end up in the watercourse, which ends up in the sea, which ends up in the gullets and other digestive tracts of fish. So don't use glitter. What I have here is food glitter. That's a very fine sugar glitter. I've not used it before, but I wanted to make it sparkle. It's not going to affect wildlife. I'll give it a go. You know, it's sat in my cupboard anyway. And then a range of scents, in this case essential oils. I've got some very flowery ones, down to baby powder, which is actually my favourite, which is lovely. You'll also need some lye, which is what's in that container back there, sometimes used in drain cleaner. Sodium hydroxide is the actual chemical name. Whatever you do, if you're going to get a drain cleaner, you'll need to have it at least 98% pure. You're far better off going to Amazon and basically ordering it from there as a pure chemical. I will get some links and pop them in the description below, particularly for the lye, and also some of the scents that I've used, and maybe some of the other bits and pieces as well. It's likely to be an affiliate link, but it won't be my affiliate link. It will be probably Liz Zorab's from By the Farm. I'll pop a link to her channel at the end of the video as well. I don't have affiliate links, but Liz is lovely, and try and support her wherever I can, so please buy your items via Liz's link. You'll also need some fats, in this case olive oil. I wouldn't normally use expensive olive oil, but that was on special at Tesco, so normally if I was going to do a big batch, I'd go and I'd buy it in a 5 litre drum from the local cash and carry, and some lard. These will be your fat bases. Okay, so this is all you'll need to create a batch of soap, other than of course your container to put it in. Now what I've got there are some standard £2 silicone loaf containers. The reason I've done that is that a lot of people have them. They're very cheap to find, and they're a manageable size. Essentially almost exactly 1 kilo of your soap mixture will fit into that, which makes it very easy to scale up the recipe. Again, I'll put the recipe in the description below. It's very important that you're accurate with that recipe. Okay, right, so before I actually go into the process of starting it, we need to talk a little bit more about the chemistry. something called saponification. So I've had it said before to me that, oh, isn't lye dangerous? Isn't sodium hydroxide dangerous? Don't they use that for cleaning drains? Yes, they do. Oh, why would you want to put that on your skin? Well, you're not. Sodium hydroxide is a very powerful alkali. Powerful alkalis of that scale can combine with almost any lipid. A lipid is any form of fat that is soluble, that is effectively a liquid. It can do it with solids, but it takes a lot longer, and you're more likely to leave pockets of unsaponified fats within your soap. But effectively, any lipid can saponify with any strong alkali. However, not all alkalis are suitable, and not all lipids actually create soap. They can create other chemical compounds. What you're doing is you're creating an exothermic reaction. What I mean by that is that when you add the lye to the lipid, what happens is that the chemical chains that make up those two different molecules, those two different chemical compounds, break, and they recombine into a new chemical compound, which is soap. However, in this case, because the compound is a smaller one, there is energy left over, which means that that energy needs to go somewhere. So in this case, being exothermic, it means that the liquid that you create, or the chemical compound that you create, as it saponifies, will release heat, which means that you'll mix the two together and you'll generate heat. Once the saponification process is finished, and I'll stress that is not finished after a day. Typically when you create soap, you'll create it in one day. The following day you'll slice it and effectively put it into whatever forms you want, and you leave it for 4 to 6 weeks. That has two real benefits. Firstly, it allows the water that you've mixed the lye with inside, and will therefore be in your soap, to evaporate off. That gives you a harder bar, and a harder bar is much less likely to effectively be washed away, so your soap will last longer. But the really important thing is it allows that chemical transformation from two separate compounds, i.e. lye and lipids, to fully convert into soap. If you do it too quickly, you can find yourself being quite irritated by it, because the saponification process hasn't completed and you've still got some raw lye in there, some raw sodium hydroxide in there. So it's very important that you leave that the 4 to 6 weeks fully without touching it. Now, the other thing to bear in mind is that different lipids have different properties. So, for example, when you're creating soap, you're trying to get a balance between cleanliness and condition. So that soft feeling on your skin once you've cleaned yourself. You don't want a very drying soap, because that dries your skin out and it's not very pleasant. And that's determined by the lipids that you use. In this case, lard and to a greater extent beef dripping are very cleansing. Beef dripping especially is very cleansing but not very conditioning. Lard is more conditioning, and something like olive oil is very conditioning. Now you can make a soap with any of these components. So for example, using 100% olive oil, you produce a type of soap called a Castile soap. Very, very conditioning, not very good at cleaning you, tends to be quite soft, and tends to not last very long. If you go pure beef dripping, that will give you a very hard soap. It'll last forever, but it'll be fairly drying and you won't get much conditioning out of it. I like using lard because it's a nice balance between conditioning and giving a nice hard solid bar, and olive oil, which again applies a little bit more conditioning, but the feel on your skin is a bit better. Now, there are thousands of different types of lipids you could use, and you can use saponification calculators that you can get online to calculate almost any combination. So you could add shea butter, avocado butter, coconut oil, And it doesn't matter whether it's an oil or a lard, because the saponification process just takes the lipid compound. You'll always end up with at least a semi-solid soap. However, my experience with all these other fancy butters is that they're very, very expensive to buy as raw materials, and don't really add a great deal in terms of either cleanliness or condition. Now, there will be people that will entirely disagree with me on that statement, and that will have their recipe that they think is best, but I've made soaps for many, many years, and quite frankly, you can go and you can spend £8 or £9 on a bar of soap that might be 5% better than a bar of soap that I'm here going to spend less than 20 pence a bar, probably something like that. For example, that olive oil back there's a litre bottle that cost me £3 on special, and these blocks of lard are 39 pence. If you add in a few pence for the other ingredients, you can see that it's actually the cost is negligible if you do it this way around, and the difference in quality of soap simply isn't worth the extra cost, in my view, for putting in the more expensive ingredients. Yeah, so that's that. Right, I'm going to clear this down and we'll start the process. Right, okay, well the first point we'll need to do is to melt the lard and mix it with the olive oil. The recipe for each kilo calls for 491 grams of lard. We have a pack here. I believe that's 250 grams. Okay. Which means that to complete it, we need to 481 grams, not 491 grams. So we need to take another block, that one and another block, and shave just a little bit off. We want to get it to, let's check what it says, that's 258, so we say the wrapper weighs about 8 grams. Let's check that we have there you go, it's about 8 grams, so 2 seconds. Okay, there we go, taking them out. So we need to take just a small amount off until we get down to 481 grams. I won't bore you with that, I'll bring you back in a moment. And there we go, 481 grams. Just going to pop that in the double boiler. Okay, what we'll now do is we'll turn the double boiler on. Get up to speed and get that melted, and I'll bring you back. Okay, whilst that's heating up and starting to melt down, we're going to weigh out the olive oil. For the olive oil we need 206 grams of olive oil. Okay, so yep, 7, close enough. The lipids are less of a concern. Particularly as in this recipe I'm doing something called superfatting. What that means is that I'm putting in roughly 5% more fats than the amount of lye solution I'm putting in can convert to soap. So there will be there will still be some residual fats in there. One of the benefits of this is it gives you a much more conditioning soap, so you've got a nice feeling soap. In addition, I have also weighed out 222 grams of soda, hydrogen peroxide, whatever you want to call it, and 222 grams of water. Always weigh these because these measurements have to be precise. When you're handling the soda, again, a non-reactive item need to be used, so I always use a sort of stainless steel dessert spoon. Some people will tell you, oh my gosh, after using lye you can't possibly use these items again. I think that's gibberish. As long as it can go in the dishwasher and go on 2 cycles, the amount of dilution that it will give you would mean that it'll be no worse than having a slightly hard water. You'll be fine. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to add the olive oil to my double boiler where my lard is starting to melt. I'm also going to add the lye to the water, always that way around. Never water to lye, always lye to water. The reason being is that if you add water to lye, when the first bits of water hit, effectively the lye will have a extraordinarily reactive effect, and it can explode. That's the only really dangerous part. I mean, you'll see I'm not wearing hand protection. If I get anything splashed on me, I just rinse it off. It will take some time to eat through the skin, and certainly wouldn't leave burns unless you're very, very stupid and hold your hand in the solution. As long as you're careful and reasonable, the only thing I would suggest is eye protection. Now, I wear glasses, so I'm fine. Mine are largely covered, and I'd also recommend having 2 hands to do this rather than 1. Do it a small amount at a time and give it a good stir. As I said before, this is an exothermic reaction, which means it will generate heat. The reason I'm doing the 2 at the same time is that the fats will melt down. I'll then turn them... Oh, something falling over. Take them off the boil and cool them down. Whereas this will be heating up. And you want to add the 2 together when they're roughly the same temperature. I like to do it between about 100 and 120 degrees Fahrenheit. And I'll bring you back once I get to that point. Okay, we've now got the 2 liquids. I've got the lipids melted. We'll just check the temperatures. If you can see, 142 degrees for the lye mixture, and 161 degrees for the lard and oil mix. We'll have to leave these for a bit to cool down because I want them ideally about between 100 and 120 degrees before we mix them together, and they need to be broadly the same temperature. For those of you that don't know what this is just an electronic temperature sensor and temperature gun. These are fantastic. I realise this won't be in most homes. A perfectly ordinary thermometer would do exactly the same job. This just means I've got to go sticking it between the lye and the fat solution because that can cause issues. These are relatively cheap, and I use mine all the time. I use it for canning, for jam making. It's very, very useful for all sorts of preserving methodologies. And again, I'll stick a link to that in the description below. Right, we'll come back in a bit when these have cooled down. Okay, and we're back. You can see that's 116. That's 110, so that's close enough. 100 to 120 degrees Fahrenheit and fairly close in temperature is the key. Now, I'm going to pop both of these into this large pot before I mix it up. I could probably get away with putting it in that glass bowl and just doing it in there. However, it does have a tendency to splash. So I tend to do it in quite a large, or at least a tall neck pot like that. So I'll bring you back in a second when I can probably bring you along as I pour these in. Okay. Now what I will do is I will be mixing these up with the hand blender to something called trace. I will explain trace to you once I've done it because this is quite noisy, and I'll bring you back in a moment. Okay, we're back and we're now at trace. What trace is when, I don't know if you can see, if I lift this up, you can still see an impression. It's like thick pudding, or thin pudding, sorry. This is the point where we add fragrances. And we add colours, and in my case some edible glitter. Now, with fragrances it's important to remember these are essential oils that you're predominantly adding. And the thing with essential oils is there's two things. Because they are an oil, saponification can actually happen with some of the lipids that are within those oils. The other thing to remember is that scents fade with time, particularly citrus notes and lavenders, but they're renowned for fading. Other than that, it's entirely personal preference and personal taste as to how much you like or don't like. Add as much as you want, really. It's entirely up to you. So in my case, I'm going to be quite haphazard with my scent. This is baby powder, this one of my favourites. We're going to also add some of this glitter. Be fairly generous with that as well. And we're going to add a little bit of food colour, purple in this case. So just going to add normal bog standard food colour. And I'll hit that with the blender and bring you back in a second. Okay, and there we are. That's our soap all ready. You can see it's already starting to go off. What I'm going to do is I'm going to pop it into this mould here, and I'll bring you back in a second. After we slice it up, this will now stay here for 24 hours whilst it cures and sets up. Now it's quite important that because the saponification process requires heat, that we keep this warm. So what we will do is you could just use cling film over the top, but I'm going to put a baking sheet, a silicone baking sheet, and pop a nice warm blanket over it and tuck it in for the night. Ooh, there we go. I'll come back in the morning and you can come with me to slice it up. And here we are the following morning. What we're going to do now is uncover the nicely set soap. One of the benefits of these silicone moulds is they just pull away so easily, and you can turn it out. All I'll do now is slice it up into slices and leave it in a cardboard box for the next 4 to 6 weeks. And that's it, folks. That's all she wrote. I will see you on the next one. Bye.